What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, ready to talk some football with my good buddy, Andy Herman, the creator of the Pack a Day podcast and purveyor of fine Packers takes anywhere you travel on the internet. Andy, how the hell are you, man?
Good. Coming off a fun day of practice. Obviously, we got some good news from Matt LaFleur prior to practice, which I know we're going to talk about, but things
No
are good,
doubt.
man.
Absolutely. Yes, since you mentioned it, we did get three gentlemen back on the practice field today, namely Elton Jenkins, Robert Tunyon, and Christian Watson. How much did they work? What did you see from them? What's the latest on the three new additions to the practice?
Yeah, just, three small additions. Your all pro, arguably tackle, your second round draft pick that everyone's been dying to see, and your tight end who caught double digit touchdowns a
No
couple
big deal.
seasons ago. Yeah, just
Nothing
a
major.
few. Yeah, just a few minor players, but no, it was really great to see all three of them back. I thought Christian Watson specifically, all of them just individuals. They're probably not going to do team for a while yet, but Christian Watson was cutting on a dime. You could see him moving extremely well. Again, to the untrained medical eye, I get to pretend to be a Packers analyst, but I can't pretend to be a doctor as much as I try. But you never quite know. But man, you would never know that he was just coming off of any sort of injury. So I thought he looked fantastic. And then you saw Jenkins and Tunyon when you were at camp. Obviously,
Right.
both guys looked really good off to the side that never, you never really know until you finally see them back. But I thought same thing. I thought both those guys looked really, really good. So just really encouraging to see all three guys practicing.
So encouraging, no doubt about it. Packers fans got to be very excited with the news. Let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back to Friday night and talk about this game because you and I haven't chatted since Friday. And my goodness, Twitter is filled with opinions and breakdowns and all sorts of fun stuff when it comes to what we saw transpire. And of course, most of that starts and ends with the play of Jordan Love, the quarterback. I thought played pretty well. Did he have a great game? No. Was he bad? No. But it's fascinating to me to see what almost a Rorschach test his play has become across not just, and I'm not just talking about people who watch the Packers day in and day out like you and I do, but like just nationwide, like people who maybe only tuned in for the highlights. Like it's everyone's got to seemingly have an opinion about what they see from Jordan Love, and I understand it when you're picked as the maybe then heir apparent now. Who knows how that trajectory plays out? I get the scrutiny is going to come, but I saw a young QB who looked worlds better than he did the first two summers and hopefully continues to improve from what we saw Friday to next Friday against the Saints.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I tweeted, I thought this is, sort of the same Jordan Love that we've seen sort of so far in training camp this offseason. Some wild plays that catch your eye. I mean, seeing the touchdown throw to Romeo Doubs was beautiful. I mean, just picture perfect, both from Doubs and Love. So those are positives. I thought he was much more confident in the pocket, getting to his drops. A couple things. The accuracy I thought was, a little bit awry at times. Some of the layups, and here's the big thing, right? And I know I'm not preaching to you here, but like you're working with a lot of backups and you don't know if guys are, just a yard off of what Jordan Love is expecting them to be. Even some of those runs or the plays out in the flat to the running backs where Love just looks like he's a second off. Is that on the running back? Is that on the quarterback? Almost impossible to know. The couple throws or the one throw to Doubs on the sideline where it ends up in the interception, probably would have liked to see it out in front of him. Did Doubs maybe run the route half a yard off? Who knows, right? But
Who knows?
a couple of those accuracy things I think you'd like to see, just improved upon a little bit. So I thought it was, sort of up and down. And again, sort of a microcosm of what we've seen in camp. But I agree with you. I think this is still a step in the right direction from what we've seen the last two summers.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the stuff in the flat to the running backs. And I think it would be more concerning if I hadn't seen so many excellent throws in that regard in camp. Like
Agreed.
That's the thing to me where that hasn't been an issue all camp long. And as you're pointing out there, he's working with a lot of kind of disparate moving parts all across the board. I'm not worried about that. What I do find interesting, what I think I will be most interested in is, does he clean that up from this first game to the second game? And this, I mentioned it a little bit on Twitter this morning, like this fact of life that we kind of find ourselves in the Twitter world and the internet, where it's not a 24-hour news cycle anymore. It's an hour-to-hour news cycle. Like everybody seemingly has to like stamp their kind of end opinion on something where it's obviously still a work in progress, and it will be until he is given the reins, if that day ever arrives. To me, it's much more important to see how he takes what he sees on tape and what coaching he might get from Tom Clemens, Matt LaFleur, etc., and he transfers that to the work on the field, especially this week, both in the practices against the Saints, but more importantly, the game against the Saints next Friday night.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think there were some real positives. And one of the things I really like about Jordan Love is, you go back to his final year at Utah State where everything was changing around him. Things didn't go exactly according to plan. He was just the same guy, down in and down out, play in and play out, game in and game out. And I thought, just how he responded to a couple of those interceptions, the play that goes off of Davis's hands, the Dubs pick, the Rodgers pick, like he just hung in and he kept going through it. And then eventually gets the Danny Davis touchdown, which was another gorgeous pass. So I love that he has that mentality where whatever happened previously was not going to bother him. He's going to be the same quarterback down in and down out. Like I said, would have liked to have seen a couple of things that were a little bit cleaner. How I'm just curious, how would you evaluate him overall for where you would like him to be at year 3 in his progression?
I'd love for him to be a little bit further ahead as far as consistency goes.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think you mentioned it. There's stuff you'd just like to see cleaned up on a more consistent basis, like whether it's the decision-making in the pocket, which I thought was pretty darn good actually on Friday, but coming off of that and knowing when to get off schedule and things of that nature. I think maybe you're seeing a young QB who is trying to go through his reads, right? And you're trying to be maybe not perfect, but you're trying to do in the pocket stuff, which is undoubtedly been drilled into your head when we've seen the athleticism. You saw it on the kind of read option there where he gets a first down, that second drive, things of that nature. And I'm not saying he's got to take off every play, but just trusting himself a little bit more. I know he's probably got a ton of information being thrown at him. There's no doubt he's got a new QB coach who probably is stressing different things than the previous 2 years with Luke Getsy. But I think the consistency as far as the fundamentals and just down in and down out, drive in and drive out. Those are the things where it's still that throw, the interception, the third interception to Amari Rodgers. It's a head scratcher in the sense of decision-making, right? And you and I talked about this on the sideline at camp. He's good for at least one of those every practice and seemingly now every game where I know we've gotten spoiled by Aaron Rodgers. You're never going to find another quarterback who is so careful with the ball, has such a great TD to INT ratio. I'm not expecting Aaron Rodgers, but the elimination of those types of plays is necessary if he is going to be a starter in this league. You can't give the ball away. And he seems to want to do it, like I said, at least once a practice, where it's just so head-scratchingly kind of you don't get what he's looking at or kind of understand. And if you can just kind of iron that part of his game out, and look, I still think he's a very young quarterback, and there's still time for him to do that. But that, to me, is the number one thing that he needs to work out.
Yeah, for me, I think one of the reasons that I still have some level of hope / maybe confidence isn't the right word, but like some level of hope still in Jordan Love is for me, you can still see, I think it's very, very clear. You can still see that he's thinking a lot. Like nothing's like completely natural yet. Like you can still see that, like, he's figuring out exactly where he wants like the throw to be. And you can see that he's still trying to kind of working and thinking as he's going through his progressions. It's not a natural, almost anything yet, but you can see progress and all, right? You can see him getting to his drops quickly.
I was just going to say, there are plays where you do see him kind of just hit the top of his drop and rip it, and he's not overthinking it, right?
Absolutely.
Where I think you definitely saw a lot of that his first 2 years.
And I think that's like the first step in sort of getting to that point where he's not, thinking quite as much anymore. And when Matt LaFleur's talked about, like, I just want to see him rip it and throw the ball a little bit more. I think it's all about playing with confidence and not quite thinking about all those different things. And I still think, as you're mentioning, new quarterbacks coach and things like that, I'm sure he's still working on the different mechanics that he wants to master. I think he's still working on mastering this Matt LaFleur offense. I think he's still going through like all of the different things that a young quarterback goes through. If I felt like, and I like not to throw it's always fun throwing a Chicago Bear under the bus, but like a few years in, like with Mitch Trubisky, you could just tell like he understood like he had everything there and you just didn't have it, right?
You just couldn't translate it, right?
Exactly. Like that's not where I'm at with Jordan Love. I still feel like there is a potential.
Oh, you're definitely seeing progression There's
Exactly.
no
Where
doubt about
everything
that.
just slows
Yeah.
down and he's not thinking anymore. And if he gets to that point and just starts ripping the ball, that's where we can see those Romeo Dobbs plays type happen, the Danny Davis plays type happen. So the
Right.
fact that we're starting to see pieces of it is encouraging, but I'm 1,000,000% with you. The consistency piece is still a little bit disconcerting at times.
Let's look at the guys up front, not necessarily just on Friday night, though obviously there's a lot to kind of go over when you look at the tape, what have you, but including what you saw in practice today, because I know you noted that Zach Tom was getting snaps at left guard.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me, just the different disparate pieces. And obviously we've got Elton possibly coming back into the mix, right? Down
Yeah.
the line. So it's a possibility. I'm not ready to say, as Matt LaFleur said, it's just one step. Who knows? But it is fascinating to me. You and I talked a lot at camp, and I believe the last time we talked football like this, about maybe not concern, but man, the right side especially has been kind of pushed around throughout camp. Now, obviously, the Packers front is very talented and very good, but I was pleasantly surprised, especially with the front line, the front starters on Friday night, how well they held up in pass pro. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a hell of a lot better than I was expecting. I thought we'd see a few more fire drills than we ended up seeing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And as Matt LaFleur mentioned, they did a lot of quick passing concepts, which I think helped some of that out a little bit.
Always,
But
right?
but I do think and as Matt mentioned as well, when he needed time, more often than not, he had the time to throw the football and stand up tall in the pocket. And I think there was a level of encouraging, just seeing how things progressed in that regards there. So I think there's still reason for hope. And as we know, David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins cure a lot of ills if all of a sudden they're back ready to go. But
Oh yeah.
I think Zach Tom is really interesting. I thought he played a pretty darn good game. Man, if Josh Myers can progress and play like I thought he did in that game and really be the stalwart center that they need him to as a second round pick from a season ago, that would be a huge step in the right direction. Very confused as to the John Runyon Jr. Not getting snaps at the one and Zach Tom. I think that's just probably a one-off, and maybe John needed a little
I
extra
gotta
help.
suspect that that's just seeing what how Zach fits, right?
I
And
think
can
so
he
too.
make the moves that are necessary? And the more you can do, right? I don't think it
Exactly.
really says anything about Runyon other than they just want to see Zach at that position
I
when
think
he
so
can.
too. And I think the biggest tell there is that it's not like now Runyon was working with the twos, right? Like if all of a sudden
Exactly.
Tom's working
Right.
with the one and
Exactly.
now Runyon's with the twos, now that's a tell of
Right.
like, okay, something's up here. But
They're
he
actually
wasn't. He
making
was
a
just
switch or
getting
thinking about it. Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
No, I agree with you though. I think overall that first game for the offensive line was a win, especially with how Green Bay's defensive line has sort of been kind of handling them at times in practice so far.
And you mentioned a couple of the receivers. Obviously, Romeo Dobbs, future Hall of Famer, had his first touchdown in the preseason. Always good to see him get involved. And then the Danny Davis play, I'm telling you, man. And I know I've talked your ear off about this kid, but he has had such a solid camp. And to see him get out there on Friday night and produce, and a back shoulder throw too, which is no easy task. I mean, that's not a simple play that he makes there on that ball from Love. I was so encouraged by what we saw, obviously from Dobbs, but even Davis, I think, is gonna, if he can continue. Now, obviously, that's the key. You haven't arrived, but if he can continue to do what he's done all throughout camp, and then Friday night, again, I still don't think he's like knocking down the door to the 53, but he is certainly making a case for the practice squad.
Yeah, I said last week before the game, I said to me, he's a lead pipe lock for the practice squad. I don't think there's a way he can crack the 53, although he keeps making plays like that, and I wouldn't
Who
totally rule it
knows?
out.
Who
And I
knows?
don't think he gets claimed, but again, you keep making plays like that, and maybe somebody takes a look at him. But
Right.
I think they would be beyond thrilled to get him back on the practice squad. The only thing holding Danny Davis back at this point is the fact that he's not like this elite level athlete, right? He's
Yeah.
not super tall, he's not super fast, he's not super anything. He's just really good at the sport of freaking football, and it's just really fun to watch him play. I think he'd primarily be a slot wide receiver, but man, what a great play on the outside. He continues to make plays practice after practice. And no, I've been incredibly impressed. And we would not be in August at 1265 if we did not have another undrafted. I actually thought this like
Yeah, gotta
a
do
few
it.
weeks
Gotta do
ago.
it.
And
Right.
I'm like, who's got like, and like, this is up to
Right.
Danny Davis to continue the tradition because there's no other undrafted wide receiver on the roster. I'm
He's
like, it's up to him to
help us,
continue. Like,
Danny Davis. You're our only hope.
the Tory Gurleys, the DeAndre Burrells, the Alan DeGraffin Reeds like 30 years ago. Like
Amazing pull.
we
Wow.
can just go on forever of like, there's always some undrafted Chasten West. Like we could, but no, kudos to
Wow.
Danny Davis. Like he's building the foundation for another random wide receiver tearing it up in camp. But he's earned it and he's deserved it. He's been awesome.
No question about it. But then we move from wide receivers to tight ends, and whoo, baby, Tyler Davis, buddy, what happened? I mean, I actually think he's had a good camp. And I know I saw that you kind of said that he hasn't done anything special, which is probably true. But I think he's made plays every day as far as like
Yeah.
getting open and, being in the right spot and making the catches that are thrown to him, etc. He hasn't been outstanding. He hasn't like made any wow plays, but he's had, I think, a pretty good camp. But holy cow, whether it was the obvious drop that ended up, in the interception, that was kind of the highlight of his poor day, but also inline blocking, some of the stuff on the perimeter. I mean, what a bad showing from a guy who I was thinking was pretty set, but man, you get Tunyon back and Dominic Daphne maybe starts making an ascension. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I still think he's got a lot ahead of him. I think if he can kind of turn it around from one bad performance, he's going to be okay. But holy Toledo, that was disappointing to say the least.
Man, we went, a month to 3 weeks ago, like where I was pretty convinced that Tyler Davis was probably going to start as tight end 1 against Minnesota, assuming that
Right?
Tunyon probably wasn't going to be back in time. And like you said, all of a sudden Tunyon's back. He has a rough day. DeGuara's had a pretty solid camp. Daphne's had a solid camp. Mercedes Lewis isn't going anywhere. And you start doing some, roster math pretty quick. And you're just like, man, you have a couple more days like that where you're dropping passes that end up in interceptions and have at least 2 plays that were completely blown up because of failure to block. And it's like, all right, that changes things pretty quick. So I'm still very bullish on his overall talents. I think he has a lot of skills that you really, really like. I think he probably is still on the better than, expected to make the roster.
Good chance. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. But yeah, I think he still, now has some work to do, but he had a nice catch today in the middle of the field from Rodgers, hit him in stride, separated easily. So those are the things, like you said, that you see show up from time to time. Just again, that consistency thing where, similarly to Jordan Love, you just like to see it a little bit more day in and day out.
Baby. No doubt. Let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball. Ladies and gentlemen, we have breaking news coming out of Green Bay. The Packers have defensive line depth. And I know it's one preseason game. We've only seen a couple weeks of practice at camp. I understand all the caveats. I'm ready to declare it. I don't care. Everything I've seen, they have depth along the defensive line. I'm not telling you they're all superstars or anything, but holy cow, I have never seen a group of guys who collectively are going to be lucky to crack the 53, put on a better performance throughout a preseason game in Green Bay in a long time at that position. Chris Slayton was shocking to me.
Yeah.
I mean, especially considering I haven't seen a ton of him in camp. Obviously, we'd spend a lot of the times watching the ones when they split up. But even when I did watch the 2s and 3s, wasn't particularly impressed, didn't think much of him. But I tell you what, he put on a damn show Friday night. I was very surprised.
Yeah, he put on a show. And going into that game, one of the things I was most excited about was a potential D-line of, and this is going to sound crazy, but this is just a weirdo that I am, but TJ Slayton, Jack Heflin, and Jonathan Ford. Like that was one of the things that I was really excited about, is watching that group. You mentioned Chris Slayton. I thought he had a nice game. Man, Jack Heflin is very improved from a season ago.
This kid.
Yes. I really do too. He seems to put on more functional strength. I feel like he's a bit quicker than he was towards the end of last season. I don't know where they go, if they keep 6 defensive linemen, if they just try to get a bunch of these guys back on the practice squad, or what they do. Jonathan Ford has definitely flashed at times as well. But man, like the fact that they could potentially go 6 deep on the roster and then maybe add guys like Ford and Slayton, or Heflin and Slayton to the practice squad, at Chris Slayton, not TJ obviously, but like those sort of guys to the practice squad, and not only have 5 to 6 guys that you can play in a rotation on game day, but if a couple of guys are hurt, to be able to pull up guys like that from the practice squad too, man, that would be unbelievable. And it just really goes to show what a great job that Brian Gutekunst has done putting together this very, very talented defensive line.
I mean, no question about it. It's just exciting to think about the fact that how many years have we had, like, you needed to play Kenny 98% of the snaps. And even then, like, you knew the stuff around him probably wasn't going to hold up that well. And we got a long way to go. Obviously, I understand, but man, I'm excited about the defensive line. I've been crying for help for Kenny for ages, and it feels like they finally got.
And the cool thing I think here too for this line is that I feel like all of these guys can really benefit from the fact that they don't have to play a ton of snaps, right? Like if
100% of the
Kenny, like you
snaps.
said, can
Right.
play like
Right.
60, 70% instead of 80, 90. But like if Dean Lowry is now in that 30 snap range, if Jerron Reed is in that 30 snap
Oh,
range, if TJ
baby.
Slayton is in that 20 to
Yes.
30 snap range, if Devontae Wyatt as a rookie is in that 20 to 25 snap range, like if all of these guys are kept fresh, and then even guys, whether it's the sixth guy, whether that's Heflin or Jonathan Ford, to me, there's a role on rundowns for 10 snaps per game for one of those guys to hold up well as
1,000%.
well. Like you
Yep.
all of a sudden get that rotation going, and man, it is going to keep Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker clean. It is going to make the jobs of Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith coming off the edge easier, and you're just not going to find a ton of space inside. Like it's one of the things I'm most excited about this season is where that defensive line is at right now.
And then you roll back to the defensive secondary, and it was funny to watch play out on Twitter when Leavitt let that kind of gave up the touchdown, right? The bomb, I believe it's the second drive for the 49ers. And instantly my Twitter feed is like, oh, I told you the cornerback depth is suspect. I'm like, does anyone realize that's a safety? Like, It was hilarious. Like, people who've covered the team for a long time, I'm not naming names, but we're like, oh, the corner's back depth is real suspect. That's a safety.
Yeah.
It's a safety. Now, obviously, I know Rico Gafford had, gave up a pretty significant completion later on, etc. But look, you're never going to have 100% depth everywhere along your D or along your team. I understand that. And it sucks that I know Leavitt got hurt. Sounds like he'll be out for a decent amount of time. But I tell you, one guy who really caught my eye, I thought had a really nice game, was a cornerback in Shamar Jean-Charles. I thought he played pretty well. I didn't think he was perfect, but you talk about a guy who, when and if they do want to utilize like some kind of dime set, which we haven't seen a ton of at camp, but I tell you what, I think he's had a pretty good camp, and I thought he had a pretty nice game on Friday night.
Yeah, the two corners that I think have the opportunity to fill those backup roles pretty solidly are Shamar and Keyshawn Nixon. Keyshawn Nixon has made a couple plays in the slot in camp, even just being back for about a week now, that have really caught my eye. I think he gave up 3 completions, but all of them he was like right money on the spot,
Right
made a
there,
quick tackle, everything like that.
You know
And
what?
then,
You know what? Real quick, you know what that reminded me of? Remember the very first week that Rasul Douglas played after getting picked up by the Packers, and
yeah,
he got a handful of snaps, and it was one of the exactly what you're talking about. Like I can't remember who it was, but it was in October, and whoever they played completed like 2 or 3 passes on him, but every single time he was right there, and the guy went absolutely nowhere. And I just remember thinking, okay, this kid's physical as hell. Like he's not. Like if you may catch the ball, but you are not going anywhere. That's what the Keyshawn stuff reminded me of. Like it's sure it's the sign of a guy who's played in the league and knows, okay, I might give up a completion or two, but I'm going to damn well make sure there's no yak afterwards.
Maybe this isn't going to sound super sexy to a lot of people, but like I think there's a legit chance that he can be a better version of Chandon Sullivan this upcoming season. And like that, if that's the case,
really, that's you need. Yeah, you need ditch diggers, right? And if your ditch digger is better than the old ditch digger, I'm all for it, man.
And at a vet minimum deal with, I don't think any guaranteed money, like to find that type of player who's also going to be a core special teamer for you, who knows the special team system. Like to me, that's one of the, if he can be what I think he has the potential to be, I think that's one of the real key underrated signings for Green Bay this offseason. But Shamar too, like when I watched him a season ago, he really struggled. I thought in camp, I thought he struggled in preseason. He got a cup of coffee and I didn't see much. And then this year he's been much more aggressive. He's been much more physical. And I've been really enjoying how he's, sort of attacked his business and going about just covering people and being a lot more pesky than he was a season ago. So probably, again, not going to be perfect, but as a number 4, number 5 corner, the list of teams in the NFL who don't have a corner better than Shamar at number 5 potentially. So no, I think I'm a little bit better. I feel a lot better actually watching Nixon and Shamar and where I feel now than I did, probably a month or 2 ago when I was looking at this cornerback depth chart and being like, man, after the top 3, it could be a problem. But I think both of those two, if you need them a little, bit by bit basis, week by week, I think you could be okay there.
I totally agree. Obviously we're required to talk about the special teams because they're a third of the team, or that's what they always tell us. It was unfortunate that the whole game started on a penalty on special teams. It was a nice welcome back, though. It made you feel warm and cozy, and like no time had passed, and you're right where you picked up right where you left off. And then O'Donnell's first punt was less than stellar. But But I will say overall, I know Burkic had the really horrible shank, but as it turns out, he was dealing with a hamstring injury. He's now been released. I know they picked up another kicker. But I'll tell you what was encouraging. The operation seemed good. That was my takeaway right there. Like the operation on kicks seemed solid. I know it was just extra points, but all seemed well for the most part in that regard.
Yeah, that seemed well. There was no crazy long snaps that I noticed at first glance. Obviously, again, they get a new kicker in. We'll see what happens there. I think O'Donnell will be just fine. I don't think he's ever going to be a spectacular punter, but I think he'll be able to do the job, fairly well throughout the course of the season. You had the big kick return by Amari, which was encouraging, even though I think it was a little bit more worse kick coverage than it was.
I was going to say, he took it. Hey, and part of the gig, though, is you got to take advantage of their mistakes.
Exactly.
And he certainly did that. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's looked much better as a returner, even in practices as well. So I think there were positives there. Still a lot of work to be done, but we've said it over and over. Like, just be like the 25th best special teams. I don't need you to get top of the league if you're just
no, Andy, not anymore. I want playmakers. I want people who want to go win the game on special teams. Let's go, Andy. It's a new day. It's a new dawn in Green Bay on special teams.
I will take it. If we can get there, I will gladly take it.
I love it. Andy, I can't thank you enough for hanging out, talking Packers and football and all things green and gold with me. We'll be doing it throughout the season. Andy, if you don't know Andy's work, you're clearly living under a rock. Make sure you check out his stuff with the Pack a Day podcast over at Packer Report. He's the best in the business. Andy, thanks so much for joining me, man.
Appreciate it, Aaron. Talk to you soon.